off, and it looks like we'll have some additional stragglers coming in slowly in the next few minutes. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's presentation. The topic of today is low carbon resilience and nature-based solutions, and the presentation is a part of a series that we're bringing forward to the Coastal Climate Resilience Collaborative to support knowledge sharing and ideation for regional climate resilience. I want to acknowledge that our project is funded by Natural Resource Canada's Climate Resilient Coastal Communities Program. I am calling in from the village of Chequel on the unceded ancestral territories of the Squamish Nation. And here we have the season shifting, and we've had our first mini heat wave this past week. And I'm very much grateful for the abundance of nature and the trees and the streams that have been stewarded here by the nation since time immemorial, which provide cooling and a regenerative refuge to me and all my relations. We are delighted to have Katisha Paul here with us as well for giving an opening remarks for our session and start us in a good way. So I will pass it over to Katisha to say a few remarks as well.
It's Quail and the pizza piapora coxosostination at Dart Lips down in Swinimissilch. Heitzapka, Homalquim, Heitzapka, Homochmistimo Heitzapka, Itomoch. Tichwam Eich no Iko Eich Squallowin not some out Mistimoch, Ina Coella that Ailey. Cahoella Benchnick Nuqua, Quilcrosos and Squatty Chak, Coxtumushkala. Na and Kukwa Eleanor Wells and Kukwa Iona Paul in Spapza Alec Dan. Coxtumushkala. I welcome you into these spaces in two of my languages, in Chothan and Ulchumilch. I come from the Tsartlip, Stallium, Swinomish, and Silk nations. So I'm interior Salish and in Coast Salish as well. And my names are Katisha Paul, Tsepgapelwit, and Little Angel Quilkshasos. It's an honor to be here in this space with all of you. It means those who are working together were good to one another. It means please remember these good feelings that we share with one heart and one mind. I am the Union of BC Indian Chiefs Youth Representative, along with the elected United Nations Global Indigenous Youth Caucus co-chair. And I am a Homo Shleni, a woman of this land, a granddaughter, a sister, an auntie, and above all, always have that reminder of our translation for Homo is our people of the land. And that is always the why. That's why we do this work, because we are not above or beyond anything that our relatives are made out to be. Our waters, our lands, our ancestors, those who are four-legged, the crawlers, the flyers, the swimmers, they're equal to us and we're equal to them. They are our brothers and sisters, and that is why we do this work. Oftentimes we'll hear the how are we going to do this work? And that goes along with witnessing the movement of the tides that the moon controls. This goes beyond that to look at how the trees breathe and give us the ability to breathe as well. It allows us the ability to witness which berries the bears are eating, and they'll tell us where we can go to pick those berries as well. But it also means, as we're in this moment of climate emergencies, that we are living well within climate adaptation. And it's not the first time that we've had to go through this, the change, the paradigm shifts in the way that we interact with the world around us. And while it does create a lot of climate anxiety, us as Kwamok Mistimuch are well adapted to adapting. And that goes along with opening up your hearts and your minds to what the world is telling us to do. If we sit down and we listen to the waters and we watch the ways in which the plants are blooming in various times within what we call our own seasons, it means that the seasons aren't necessarily changing. It's us who have to change the way in which we think of those seasons now moving forward. So that way it lessens the anxiety for the future generations, and recognizing that us as Kwamok Mistimok also have the inherent birthright to be consulted and cooperated with, and have the free, prior, informed consent on all projects moving forward, because we are the people of the land, and we're here to teach, and we're here to love, and we're here to guide, because this is a journey that we have to walk together with Natsamat Mistimuch, with one heart and one mind. Haitsapka. Thank you all so much for the work that you're doing. I uplift you, and I raise my hands to give you the energy that you need to carry on in this journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Katisha. Much appreciated for that beautiful opening and your remarks, which always grounds us in what's most important. Looking forward to have your guidance alongside this project as we progress. And I will just share again that Katisha is presenting next week to us with the Indigenous values and the views of the related to the climate change impact that we're seeing and the work that we're doing in climate resilience. So next Thursday on June 5th, please pass along to your colleagues as well. If you would like to share this along, it's definitely welcome to have more attendees here. Not miss the opportunity to listen to a full, thorough presentation. I'll just quickly give a brief overview of our where we're at in the project, and to ground us in the activity that why we're engaging in this activity today. So the collaborative, as I think that it's known to most here already, is on the unceded territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Sechelt nations, and that we're coming here together to engage with the staff from the nations, local governments, and regional districts, and come together to progress collaboration on implementation of climate resiliency together. And maybe I'll just move along to this slide to say that right now we're in the third phase of the project, in the planning step, where we're going through picking a few actions to move forward with and practice working together as a collaborative. And the phase 3 activities that were listed kind of in the scope and the proposal for moving forward together were to identify actions and identify practices from other regions, co-develop a list of adaptation actions. That's the survey that's out to you right now, is to kind of shortlist it. And this session that we're here part of together today is to provide training activities to support the implementation. So to listen together, to learn together, so that we can develop the action-specific adaptation plans for and developing an implementation schedule for the resilience measures that gets moved forward. Next, I will introduce our presenters, and we will pin them on the view here so that we can prepare for their presentation. We have Dr. Alison Shaw with us, who has extensive experience as a climate-focused scholar, strategist, and consultant. As Executive Director of the SFU Action on Climate team, her work on low-carbon resilience has gained her global recognition and as a resource on applying integrated and streamlined climate and sustainability solutions. Dr. Shaw has over 2 decades of experience leading cross-cutting climate change and sustainability science and policy research, and in mobilizing knowledge and developing tools and creating partnerships. As the inaugural Executive Director of SFU Climate Innovation, she's applying pra-academic approaches, leveraging the capacities of the university to advance community-centered climate action and innovation research for impact. I'm going to have a conversation with Alison about that word that is so difficult to pronounce, and definitely innovative in its essence as well. So looking forward to the innovation research for impact. And Lauren Vincent, who's also will be presenting today, is a professional engineer with a decade of experience in climate and sustainability across consulting, industry, and research. Lauren joined the SFU Action on Climate team as Associate Director in 2023, and she applies her background working on both adaptation and mitigation approaches to climate change to integrate and optimize co-benefits in climate action approaches. Lauren works to mobilize knowledge and scale innovations that accelerate the transition towards low-carbon, resilient, and sustainable communities across Canada and beyond. I will stop my screen share here, and I believe it will be Lauren who will go into screen share next. Thank you.
Give me a moment to pull it up.
Thank you, Inez. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and Katisha for that amazing introduction. That was just so grounding and wonderful.
Yeah, I was gonna say I can't wait for next week's session. Are you seeing my slides in full screen here? Perfect. Yeah, so I will be starting us off with a discussion of low carbon resilience. Oops, sorry, skipping ahead there. And for those of you who attended the webinar by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities a few weeks ago, this will be some repeat content, so bear with me for those who have attended both. But yeah, like Inez said in her introduction, my name is Lauren Vincent. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Associate Director here at ACT, and calling in today from the unceded territories of the Coast Salish people. And yeah, really thankful to Katisha for starting us off in a good way in this presentation. Yeah, so today I'll be talking a little bit about low carbon resilience and the work that ACT has done in that sphere to date, and where we're at now with low carbon resilience and our work with municipalities, and how this concept might contribute to the collaborative that is being built here. But just before we dive into what low carbon resilience is, just want to do a little bit of context setting for this conversation. So I think we've seen many graphs that look like this. There's really lots of climate action plans and targets that are ambitious, but progress to date has remained incremental. And this is a global scale graph, but it's equally true at the provincial, federal, and municipal levels here in Canada. And another sort of piece of backdrop for us in 2025, and this is some polling from our recent federal election and looking at what voters consider the biggest issue. And you can see that climate change is 8th on the list here with just 3% of the vote in terms of a top issue. And affordability, the economy, tariffs, and the US relationship really dominated voter concerns this past election with a combined 71% of the vote. And if you compare this to 2021 polling data, so just 4 short years ago, climate change was the 3rd most important issue and had 22% of the vote at that time. So even in the past 4 years, we've seen it take a bit of a backseat to some other pressing concerns. I don't want this to be a bad news story, though. I think this is a tricky graphic because this is saying the biggest influence on vote. It doesn't mean that people don't also consider the climate action important. This is just asking folks to rank what's top of mind. So not to say that it's not on anyone's mind at all, but it's certainly a shift that we've seen since 2021. And then just to give a specific example from a recent report from the Net Zero Action Research Partnership, of which ACT is a part through Alison's work. So this is called the NZAP Collective, and they've done quite a bit of work specifically on emissions reduction targets, so a piece of the climate action puzzle. There's a lot going on in this graphic, but really what I want to highlight is, again, that there's lots of climate action plans that exist and targets for both corporate and community emissions. But you can see from this graph, the blue and green colors show where municipalities have been making progress on those targets. But critically, about 40% of municipalities haven't reduced their emissions, and in some cases, they've risen. And this really, again, highlights that implementation gap we're seeing between plans and action. And I just want to highlight that although emissions reductions have been traditionally viewed as climate action, what I'll be talking about today is the fact that that's only really a part of the story, and that climate action really isn't complete without responding to the impacts of climate change, which we're seeing, as we all know, increasingly. And so that really brings us to low carbon resilience. And so I'm sure many of you are familiar with the concept now, have seen it either on our website or seen us present on it before, but just wanted to give a little backgrounder for those who aren't familiar. So the idea behind low carbon resilience is that it really brings together
climate adaptation, climate mitigation, and co-benefits and equity into a single holistic approach to municipal decision processes. And so we use this graphic to showcase sort of the missed opportunities that happen when low carbon resilience isn't being applied. And if the animations are working for me, yes, they are. So this graph essentially gives a range. So from on the vertical axis, you have risk from high to low, and then on the horizontal axis, emissions. And so if you're looking at a high risk, high emission scenario, you'd be looking at something like this suburban sprawl, which is very emissions intensive and also can contribute to risk. For example, if it's being built in wildfire or flood-prone areas, this is sort of considered uncoordinated planning and would be sort of the antithesis of low carbon resilience. And then if we were to look at adaptation focused planning only, so that would be something that would reduce risk significantly, but would be high emissions. So examples of adaptation focused planning would be air conditioning or higher seawalls, very engineered or technical solutions to climate adaptation without a consideration of emissions. And then in the bottom right corner, we have a scenario that would be low emissions but high risk. So that would be mitigation focused planning, looking at green buildings or EV chargers that are being built in floodplains, for example, with no consideration of climate adaptation and risks. So I've got a couple images of those. And so really where we want to be moving with low carbon resilience is this top right corner. So we want to be reducing risk and reducing emissions simultaneously, and always centering co-benefits, whether it's health, financial co-benefits, equity. That's really the sustainable development pathway that we want to be embarking on. And low carbon resilience is the lens that can get us there. And so this would be things like coordinated planning. So you could have zero emission and risk resilient buildings, green blue infrastructure. Alison will be talking after me about our natural solutions initiative, which is really a great low carbon resilient strategy. So that's the background. And to bring it back to the discussion of climate action being deprioritized in our political cycle, wanted to talk a little bit about the resilience piece of low carbon resilience. So ACT's recently been focused on that resilience building aspect of LCR, because regardless of our politics, we can all agree that we want to live in communities that are socially, economically, and environmentally resilient. And a key note here in this definition of community resilience that ACT's put forward is the use of the word thriving. We want to move towards a state that not only assesses and minimizes vulnerabilities, but that's also able to bounce back, recover, and improve from extreme events and other disruptions. And so I mentioned that LCR, we think of it as a lens, and that is really the way we like to talk about low carbon resilience. It's not meant to be an additional process. It's meant to be a lens, or a triple lens in this case, through which you can look at existing plans and priorities in a municipality and really make decisions that advance all three of these priorities simultaneously. And like I showed in that graphic, it's meant to reduce maladaptive and contradictory outcomes and really opens the door to multi-solving and identifying new opportunities, whether that's for new financing opportunities for climate action, or just opportunities to break down silos and collaborate within municipalities. And we also wanted to highlight that not all projects need to be identified with these priorities in mind. Like, not every adaptation approach is going to be low carbon resilient. It doesn't mean it shouldn't happen. It's just a way to sort of prioritize amongst multiple priorities. And if there's a way to advance low carbon resilience, whether it's through a suite of projects that tackle adaptation and mitigation separately and can be brought together, or whether it's one project that really is able to bring all these opportunities together, then the LCR approach not every action that's taken by a community needs to be all of these things at once, but it's really meant to be, again, a lens through which to prioritize. And so just to give a little bit of background on the work that's been done on low carbon resilience, really Alison should be presenting this since this is her work, but I'll do my best to summarize. So this is the Integrated Climate Action for BC Communities initiative from 2018 to 2021. And this was really the work of Alison and Deb Hartford, who you would have also met through the collaborative, some of you, on testing and co-developing the approach in practice. So there were 10 partner communities, including one First Nation, and the goal was really to bring this approach to these communities and see where they were able to go with it in terms of embedding low carbon resilience into their planning and strategy. And this ground truthing, like I said, is really where some of the resources that you can still find on our website. There's lots of great resources on we call it the UBCIC project affectionately. You can find lots of great information on the partner communities there. And just wanted to highlight as part of this UBCIC project, there were municipalities that were at many different stages of climate action. So the approach is really designed to meet municipalities where they're at. You don't need to have existing plans, adaptation or mitigation plans. You can apply it to things other than plans. You can use it to embed it into your RFP process or your financial decision making. There's all kinds of ways to apply LCR. And really the goal is to move those any plans and policies towards implementation. We don't want to just have more plans sitting on a desk. It's really about building the tools and the muscles to implement climate action across the organization. And as you can see from the graph or the image I showed on the last slide, there's some smaller communities that were involved in that project as well. So it really can be applied both within small, rural, remote communities and also larger urban municipalities. And just wanted to highlight a few of the ways that low carbon, the LCR approach differs. So it is similar to a typical planning to implementation process, but one of the key differences with the UBCIC project was the upfront development of a cross-departmental, cross-sectoral climate action team at each of the municipalities, often stewarded by what we call the climate champion. And then really the goal of embedding climate into decision-making, procurement, and financing decisions. So not having it sit in its own sort of department or its own silo, really. Really wanting to bring that throughout the organization with the help of the cross-departmental team. And in some cases, this catalyzed changes to corporate structure and governance in the municipality as well. And so I'll just give a couple examples, some highlights from that project. So in Summerland, you could see that they were sort of on the path 3 of the diagram a couple slides back. So the staff requested that consultants integrate LCR into the district's business prioritization criteria and reporting frameworks. And this really helped avoid damage costs and aligned with triple bottom line decisions. And the district now has a requirement that all decisions and projects over $10,000 be screened with low carbon resilient criteria. And these projects are actually signed off by managers, directors, finance, the CAO, and council, which also simultaneously enhances organizational climate literacy. So every step of this process really brings the approach through the organization. And Summerland recognized the value of building climate into current priorities to reduce future impacts. And then I'll give a little example from Port Moody. So for those who are at the FCM presentation, we actually had Laura Sampliner, who was working at Port Moody at the time, present. So I'll do my best to condense her excellent presentation into one slide. But just some quick highlights from our work with Port Moody. Port Moody was about to engage on 2 planning processes, one for adaptation, one for mitigation, and they were combined together under the LCR approach. And that saved, essentially they saved 50% of funds. And they have developed a cross-departmental team that was initiated for that project that continues to meet and discuss synergies. And some of the outcomes of that work were an extreme weather response plan, focusing on vulnerable populations, a low carbon resilience policy that embeds those decision criteria across the organization, and an assessment of their natural assets being valued at $377 million, which is currently being embedded into their natural asset management plan. And these are just a little snapshot of some of the most recent reporting from Port Moody, showing that they're still working to include a low carbon resilient lens in their policies and plans. And as of 2023, they had 5 new plans that were brought under the LCR approach. And yeah, there's many foundational actions from that climate action plan that was developed that are still being implemented to further resilience and greenhouse gas reductions. And so I just wanted to highlight some of the co-benefits that are possible with the low carbon resilience approach. So I know I skipped through those very quickly, but just wanted to show there's different suites. So economic, environmental, and social co-benefits are really just some. There's also health benefits. And really the low carbon resilience approach is meant to promote actions that multitask or multi-solve and have community achieve climate resilience and sustainability goals while reducing emissions. And these, as you can see from the economic co-benefits, they can save people money over the long term. They can save our communities money, and really extends climate action into all areas of work and opens up new opportunities for funding climate action projects, as I mentioned, by piggybacking climate solutions on other areas of funding. And as climate is being less at the forefront of our elected leaders' minds, it becomes increasingly important to realize these co-benefits and utilize them to move low carbon resilience and climate action forward. And this is, on that note, a really great report from PICS earlier this year, which talks about message framing. And they highlighted 5 key message framings that can be used to promote climate engagement in BC. And I thought this was really great. I mean, the economic benefit framing one is clear, especially given some of the priorities listed in that poll I shared. But there's also, they highlight public health, environment and biodiversity, social norms, and extreme weather are all ways in which to package and deliver climate action messaging that is compelling to folks who have other priorities on their minds. So all the ways in which this approach can multi-solve. And I know Inez was saying there's been quite a bit of talk about health and biodiversity within the collaborative so far. And that's really at the heart of the nature-based solutions work that ACT is doing. So with that, I'll hand it over to Alison to talk about ACT's Natural Solutions Initiative.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you everyone for being here today. Really exciting to be presenting this work. And hopefully low carbon resilience makes perfect sense to many of you on the call in terms of just integrated lens for considering future projects. One of the low carbon resilience strategies that ACT is moving forward rapidly is on nature-based solutions. And this really comes from nature-based solutions work being of significant interest to communities across Canada. And for those of you on the call that may not be familiar, nature-based solutions are actions to protect, conserve, restore, and sustainably use and manage natural or modified assets or systems. And we're using this United Nations Environment Agency definition that's been supported by 196 nations across the globe. And obviously, in this definition, nature-based solutions are projected to do a lot for our communities moving forward. Can you change the slide, Lauren, please? Thank you. We do know that nature-based solutions can act as a really significant low-carbon resilience strategy as we confront things like heat and flood events in a more frequent manner. Nature-based solutions can increase the permeability of communities to be able to absorb excess water and excess heat and protect populations while also creating livable environments. In addition, nature-based solutions have been mobilizing across communities, largely through organizations like the Natural Assets Initiative, for instance, that's done tremendous work in showcasing how nature-based solutions and natural assets can support communities as they confront not only climate changes, but also the vulnerability of being exposed to those changes through aging infrastructure and through the diversity of services that are being required for communities to undertake. So nature-based solutions are being presented as an opportunity to really reduce costs in community infrastructure while building all of these other co-benefits, as Lauren talked about. Lauren? So some of the key findings from our engagements with communities in BC and more broadly is that there's a growing popularity of nature-based solutions work. It's focusing largely on food security in communities, which has become a very significant topic, as well as economic development opportunities to support and train people in nature-based solutions work, natural asset management, so including those nature-based solutions as part of asset management for our communities, and also deriving the health and well-being benefits from being around nature and having more green space in our communities. However, in the nature-based solutions world, often biodiversity, so attending to our non-human relatives, is overlooked, and the connected kind of ecosystems that are required in order to encourage biodiversity. Also, inclusive governance systems. So at the community level, we're finding that communities, though many are interested in kind of partnering or aligning with First Nations protocols and worldview, the governance pieces are often lacking. And in many communities across Canada that are considering nature-based solutions, actually climate action is sometimes neglected as well in terms of how can nature-based solutions be used both to buffer our communities against those impacts of climate change, but also how are these ecosystems being impacted as the climate changes? And so needing to think through the system is often something that's getting missed in nature-based solutions work. So we need, what we found at ACT is a need for more coordinated and collaborative approaches and multi-solving approaches that move to implementation and can be monitored and evaluated. And as such, flip the slide, Lauren. ACT has spent the past 2.5 years reviewing the literature on nature-based solutions across the globe in order to develop a really significant database of nature-based solutions approaches. And what we've found through our analysis of that database is that nature-based solutions typically are based in disciplinary narratives and approaches, and so are often disconnected from each other. And there's an opportunity to actually build a coherent narrative and establish some disciplinary protocols in order to, really advance nature-based solutions and see the multi-solving benefits of nature-based solutions. We've also found in our analysis that that nature-based solutions are being done largely because of this disconnection on an ad hoc and project-based just on kind of siloed projects. And so there's an opportunity to kind of think through nature-based solutions as, connected to the broader ecosystem, bringing more cohesion to nature-based solution planning and projects that actually links up across different scales of action, ranging from the watershed all the way down to site scale planning. And that nature-based solutions are often narrow and singular focused rather than focusing on multi-solving benefits that we can derive when we're thinking about our communities and where they reside in our natural systems. Lauren? So because of this, ACT has built out our Natural Solutions Initiative, which you can find in the chat. Our Natural Solutions Initiative is really moving and advancing projects forward that actually consider where nature-based solutions are positioned within the ecosystem and how to build more systemic and coherence, more systems-oriented and coherence-oriented nature-based solutions. So there are three ways that we are moving projects forward. The first is understanding three nested approaches. So overcoming that those disconnected disciplinary narratives and building coherence across three approaches that are pretty fundamental to driving nature-based solutions. Those are ecosystem-based management approaches at the watershed scale, natural asset management at the community scale, and blue-green infrastructure approaches at neighborhood and site scales. And so these different approaches, we've tried to capture kind of examples of these within a spectrum that ranges from naturally occurring assets like forests and wetlands, and the opportunities to restore some of those assets in order to support communities' low carbon resilience, as well as hybrid assets like stormwater ponds or community gardens that help to absorb heat and have a range of other co-benefits, all the way to engineered assets like green roofs and cisterns and stormwater management ponds, permeable pavements, these types of things. So really thinking strategically about how these particular practices that cross a variety of disciplines ranging from biology and ecology to engineering can actually function together, and to recognize that there's three primary approaches for doing nature-based solutions work. So the goal of ACT is to understand how these approaches are being used at different scales of action, ranging, as mentioned, from the watershed scale. You know, watersheds are the scale in which climate impacts are impacting our communities through wildfires, through drought, through, the impacts of heat events. And so really thinking strategically about linking nature-based solutions back to that scale is something that we're really driving forward at ACT. And working with communities like the City of Port Moody to kind of think about their natural asset management planning alongside their green infrastructure strategy that they're building, and how those two approaches can be implemented at different scales, but actually create coherence and cohesion across the natural systems like hydrological systems and ecosystem connectivity systems between the watershed and the community, neighborhood, and parcel scales. Lauren? And we're also interested in, kind of synthesizing a lot of this work so that nature-based solutions are not being done as singular kind of management practices for supporting infrastructure and communities alone, for instance. But when nature-based solutions planning work is being done, we're actually thinking about the opportunities to multi-solve across 5 key areas relating to biodiversity, climate action, both adaptation and mitigation, sustainable service delivery in terms of water conveyance, for instance, and the opportunities to support health, equitable management of nature-based solutions in vulnerable neighborhoods, for instance, and justice. And part of our really critical goal with nature-based solutions work is to center Indigenous knowledge and leadership. And we're seeing opportunities to do that at the watershed and territorial scales. Lauren? So currently, the way that our Natural Solutions Initiative work is moving forward is really to think strategically about all the dimensions of this three-dimensional cube. Thinking about scale on the left-hand side, 4 scales of activity that nature-based solutions projects reside in. Thinking about time scale and timestamp and the recognition that we need to be monitoring and evaluating nature-based solutions in order to understand the benefits and the trade-offs of nature-based solutions in practice over time, and to really kind of build out these key areas to multi-solve, to use nature-based solutions to support not only climate action, but also biodiversity and health service delivery. And so we've been working, continuing our work with the City of Port Moody that started with the Ikibiki project and continues now in terms of trying to connect natural asset management to blue-green infrastructure, their blue-green infrastructure strategy. And both of those strategies were a product of their LCR planning. So what we're aiming to do now is kind of think about the watershed in which the City of Port Moody resides in order to better understand the ecosystem and the ways that the ecosystem can be enhanced and restored to provide the services and the opportunities to the community and neighborhood scales and those natural assets that have been inventoried, and ways to deliver blue-green infrastructure that support not only the services provided to our communities and to our neighborhoods, but also to ensure that we're thinking about the actual ecosystem and the biodiversity that we want to enhance. Lauren? So, this is a very blurry slide. What we're doing right now is working with Renewable Cities and a few other partners, the Hey Neighbor Collective and Happy Cities group, in order to better understand nature-based solutions planning at site scale and how that can actually contribute to more coherence with our natural asset inventories and planning, and really contribute to nature-based planning at all scales of delivery. So we have a team of really fantastic scholars and RAs working on this scale of nature-based solutions planning, working in multi-unit residential buildings and looking at the key opportunities that are available with developers to think through how to do this work in a good and in a productive and cost-effective manner. We also, Lauren, if you skip forward, have a whole series of resources that we've developed that are aiming to promote thinking in this type of cohesive and systemic way, and building tools and resources to support people to do this kind of work. And so here are 3 examples of those resources. We have our multi-benefit indicators tool, which was really we were interested in identifying the multi-solving aspects of different nature-based solutions work. And so our postdoc fellow here at ACT, Cherry Kim, did a great analysis looking at different nature-based solutions and the types of multi-benefits that are derived from those solutions. If you click forward, Lauren. So this is intended to be a tool to support, more integrated thinking across the 5 key areas that we think should be considered as multi-solving opportunities. And so this tool hopefully helps people think through those connections more fully. Lauren? We also have, we had an ACT resource research assistant look at existing regulatory tools or mechanisms that communities have available to them in order to drive nature-based solutions planning in community across planning, across engineering, across asset management, et cetera, et cetera. And so this particular toolkit showcases the types of regulatory mechanisms that communities already have available to them in order to think about nature-based solutions and opportunities to integrate nature-based solutions into community scale planning, as well as integrated stormwater management plans and so forth at the watershed scale. So this is a really integral toolkit that was also ground truthed with the city of Port Moody. So really advise you to go to this particular resource. And if you skip forward, more recently, in fact, hot off the press, we worked with research assistant Andrew Palmer because we were interested in understanding how watershed monitoring and evaluation was being done across the country. And so Andrew ended up reviewing 16 different watershed health indicator frameworks across the country to better understand what's being monitored in order to establish watershed health baselines. And he looked at both Western or settler frameworks as well as Indigenous-led or co-created frameworks across the country. And some of the findings were very interesting in terms of many of the settler-led frameworks were focused on quantitative data management and kind of snapshots of watershed health, whereas the Indigenous-led frameworks were focused more on advancing. And this comes back to Katisha's point about the adaptability and the framing of climate change. So what Andrew found is that Indigenous frameworks were focused more on how to build resilience into the watershed. So less about snapshots and more about resilience building, which we found very interesting. So this is another tool that we're hoping is of interest to you. Lauren? So the goal of the Natural Solutions Initiative is to showcase low carbon nature-based solutions as a very significant low carbon resilient strategy that can multi-solve across different community priorities. And our goal with this initiative is to put nature back into nature-based solutions planning. So we're not just thinking about nature as functional, but we're thinking about biodiversity and connectivity and all of the things that ensure that our ecosystems that our communities reside in remain functional and embedded within the larger ecosystem. And we're really interested in advancing the ethos that we need to be centering Indigenous knowledge systems and leadership, especially at the watershed and territorial scales, in order to learn from the world views and the ancient knowledges that can really support this work at that scale moving forward. Lauren?
Thanks, Alison. Yeah. And I was just, as we're talking about ACT resources, I just wanted to include a few here with a low carbon resilience focus. So for those who aren't familiar, our low carbon resilience planning handbook is also available on our website, which was a key outcome of that integrated climate action for BC communities project that I mentioned. So a good place to start for those who aren't familiar. And then another key low carbon resilience resource is the decision tool, which is just a quick reference guide for government municipal staff to think about embedding low carbon resilient decision making criteria in their organization and start the conversation about avoidable costs of a reactive approach versus coordinated and systemic management. So those are just some key resources I wanted to flag. And Alison's talked a little bit about where we're going with our Natural Solutions Initiative in terms of where our research assistants are focusing and where that's headed. And just wanted to give a little bit of a path forward for our low carbon resilience work as well. So I do think the low carbon resilience lens is one that can be used to prioritize the adaptation actions that have been identified in this collaborative. And I've taken a look at the shortlist that Ina has shared. I'm sure most of you have as well. It's really exciting to see that a lot of them are prioritizing low carbon resilience, whether indirectly or directly. There's lots of great projects that have been proposed that are also either nature-based solutions or otherwise looking at emissions reductions and equity and other co-benefits. So really exciting to see. And hopefully that's something that we can layer onto the selection process for those projects. And then outside of this collaborative, ACT is working with a few municipalities, including the City of London and the town of New Glasgow, to apply the LCR approach to their current priorities. We've gotten confirmation from the province that municipalities within BC who are interested in doing that kind of work can use their LGCAP funding towards applying the LCR approach. So if you're interested in learning more about that, feel free to reach out. And yeah, we also have an interactive low carbon resilience tool on our website, and we have some forthcoming resources, including a strategies and indicators tool for low carbon resilience that will be published this year. So yeah, just wanted to wrap up with that. And I've got a slide here with contact information and just some little screen grabs of our resources. So I'll leave it there and give some time for questions.
Thank you so much, Lauren and Alison. A lot of information to draw on in our collaborative, as well as just great to know the depth of what you've been up to in these two areas. Thank you so much for joining and presenting today. The slides will be shared back, as well as the recording of the presentation will be on the website, the project website, which will launch in a couple of weeks. And yeah, maybe we can stop the screen share and just have a little moment. We do have a survey to launch as well to get a little bit of input on how useful this session was, and open it to questions for everybody. Thank you so much. And you're able to move that. We're going to leave that poll open, but you're able to move it off of your screen so it's not covering everybody's faces. And we'll just kind of leave that running in the next 5 minutes as we close here.
I just wanted to say thanks to Nilofar for putting all those resources in the chat. I couldn't see them as I was speaking, but thanks for being on it there.
I also wanted to say hi to Michelle Lewis from Gibson's. Gibson's was one of our municipal partners during ICABICI, and Michelle Lewis's position was one of the great things that emerged out of the low carbon resilience work that was being done there. So yeah, great to see you.
Wonderful connections there. Ruth, go ahead.
Hi, thank you both for your presentation. My question is about how to navigate when you're trying to maybe move in an organization that we adopt more approaches like this. I'm thinking specifically about like the slide you showed about the multi-unit residential and all the beautiful, like the green walls and green roofs and everything. And thinking back to conversations I've had with people who are in charge of like housing initiatives and their real struggle with their mandate being just to get as like many buildings built and as many unhoused people or people who need like more affordable housing into those buildings, and they're unable to accommodate things that might make it more expensive, basically. And I'm totally bought into like the value of this work and nature-based solutions, but yeah, any kind of comment on those kind of tensions and how to approach them with communities and these people who have these competing objectives. Yeah.
Yeah, lots of comments there, especially now with the housing affordability legislation. Community planners are really struggling to even maintain the kind of progress that we've seen in terms of, energy emissions codes and, the work that has been put in at this scale. And so part of the work that we're doing with Renewable Cities is working with cities and developers to better understand where the opportunities are, especially in this climate, so that we're actually thinking strategically about the long term and not just building infrastructure that's going to last 80 years, that is going to, essentially over time drive our vulnerability to climate change. Right. So that's a really complex question, Ruth, and kind of an incisive one. Our next stage is working with the city of Vancouver and potentially some other municipalities to really think through some of the barriers that developers and planners are experiencing when implementing nature-based solutions. Those can be regulatory barriers, for instance, setbacks and these types of things, and looking for strategic opportunities to kind of advocate for changes to those barriers. And so a setback barrier, for instance, prevents nature-based solutions from being planned in between buildings and sidewalks, for instance. And so if some advocacy work could be done to change that, it could influence both provincial and national building code. So just small things like that actually can deliver big impact, and so we're embarking into that territory right now.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and we're coming to time, but if there's any other questions that lingers, feel free to email it in, and we will keep it on the queue for response offline. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day and weekend, and safe travels and journeys if you're in movement, and we will see you next Thursday at, I forget the time, but it's in your calendar, in the morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.